This is the unrestricted free agent.
Welcome into the program. Glad you're here. And I just pulled my microphone completely off the table.
I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do.
Defense, I'm going to tell you right now, they're nasty. They're going to be nasty all year.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
Who knows what's real and what's not even anymore?
When you see black and white and you're calling it purple, I got problems with that.
And LT, I told you, it's all about the deer town.
How about that for a start? About that for a start, I think it's fair to say about Gamecock football 2022. Welcome in. Hope the holiday weekend was good. Great to be back with you Tuesday morning, but some Monday morning feeling therapy, I think, for a lot of college football fans. Gamecock not at the top of the list, right? LSU fans got to be right on the cusp, right on the edge. I mean, what was that in so many ways? And now, where do you go from there? Who else in the big picture, right? If you're an Oregon fan, can you imagine how you feel after that massive beatdown? Clemson fans feeling good, but it didn't look great last night. Mid-third quarter, DJU looking a lot like he did last year, and then scrambles some that shovels it behind him. And after that, the game's totally different. Help for Georgia Tech. Big-time linebacker, heart and soul of the defense, got kicked out for targeting as well. But this is an appreciative show. Shane Beamer saying after the game, his main feeling before the game was gratitude to be in the position he was in. And I will echo those sentiments. And I am grateful we are here to talk about a ton of college football. It's certainly not just going to be me this morning. This is our show here on Unrestricted Free Agent. RL in before 6 a.m. this morning, just to say good morning. DC was in before 5 a.m. He was in so early. The live chat just kicks those comments to the curb. What, too early, I guess? Morning. Yeah, it was. Roger, good to see your sunny outlook. DC, first hot take of the morning. In my opinion, it looked like offensive line communication issues at times. Georgia State's defensive line guys were getting double teamed with guys running free. The outside blocking from the tight ends and wide receivers was really bad also. We'll get into that, but that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Josh says, morning UFAs. Craig's in. Welcome back from the concert, Craig. We got to get a concert breakdown from our man Craig, who is one of our more consistent commenters, who also said he was missing the season opener because he might have had a few drinks on the boat, bought some concert tickets, didn't realize they coincided with the season opening game of college football. The Toasters in this morning. Chris on the Facebook live stream giving me the heads up about the dang audio. So here's what we're going to do about that. I see a bunch of other you guys in there. Take some heads up on that. Happens, right? Appreciate the patience on it. So we will see what happens when I play a comment or two. I'll play comments after this game from Shane Beamer. Let's start with the offensive game plan. Let's do that, right? That's a good place to start. I'll pop up the stats here in a second. Georgia State outgained South Carolina, who obviously questioned after the game about the game plan from South Carolina and what they were thinking.
Our game plan going into this game was get the ball on the perimeter. So that's one thing, Gene. We didn't do a great job of blocking on the perimeter tonight. We had some opportunities for some big plays when we threw bubbles out there and quick screens that, frankly, we got our butts kicked on the perimeter by them a couple times. And that was a big point of emphasis going into the game, so that was disappointing to see. So we got to block on the perimeter better, but we wanted to get the ball on the perimeter, and we wanted to take shots and give our guys a chance to go make plays. Jalen Brooks did that tonight. He made some fantastic catches downfield attacking the ball. And we had some other ones called that I think we're going to look at the tape and be disappointed because we had guys probably wide open and we just weren't able to connect for whatever reason. So, we got to hit those plays and then we got to protect better as well. And we didn't do a great job of that. We had too much penetration, in the backfield for sure. But I think the biggest thing, Emily, is just we got to run the ball more consistently. We got to protect the quarterback and we got to be able to hit those shots downfield so we're not having to kick 53-yard field goals, finishing drives in the red zone.
There we go. Back and hopefully sounding clear this time. Again, appreciate your patience. Whatever you say here today, whatever we say here today, well, the feeling that I got after the game is that Shane Beamer is very clear, no pun intended. He's not seeing this thing through garnet-colored glasses. He's not saying that that was a great performance by any stretch of the imagination, because it wasn't. It just wasn't. But it was a win. And it was a relatively comfortable win, mainly due to a massive night of special teams. When you win a game by 3 touchdowns, and the SEC, I think, for those of you who are interested in this kind of thing, I believe 10-2 against the spread, might have been 2 pushes. South Carolina covers despite not playing well. That's a good place to be in the college football spectrum, I think, in a lot of ways. But special teams with 2 blocked punts returned for touchdowns, unreal. And for a guy who has been part of Beamer ball, right? I understand his dad, Frank, and Virginia Tech made the reputation, but Shane certainly trying to carry it on to some degree. To hear that he had never seen this type of thing before, never been part of 2 block punts, 4 touchdowns. Very interesting. We'll let you hear a little bit more from Shane after this thing, the 35-14 win. A lot of that courtesy of a massive night for Gamecock special teams.
I've been around some really good special teams games, but when you put it all together, fake field goal, flipping the field position on punt. I mean, Kai had a 79-yard punt tonight, and he punted 7 times, which we don't need to be punting the ball 7 times in a game. But to have 7 punts for a 49-yard average and a long of 79, that's big time. And then Mitch to do what he did from a field goal standpoint as well, and then the block 2 punts for touchdowns. There was a lot of really, really good special teams tonight, and a lot to build on as well.
So I realized that was late Saturday night. We're sitting here on early Tuesday morning, but having Labor Day off, going to hear a bunch from after that game to make sure that we understand exactly what Shane Beamer had to say about it, what Spencer Rattler had to say about the game, and where we are moving forward now. Appreciate all the feedback as you're weighing in this morning. Adam says our offensive line is so bad. I don't know how we're going to win games with this offensive line. Satterfield is not good. Well, it's a fair criticism, right? And Adam has a tendency to go glass half empty. DC is just in here. 79-yard punt. That's outstanding. Yeah, it was crazy when it happened. I was there with my crew on Saturday night. 9-year-old, 8-year-old, 7-year-old boys. My 2 boys and their cousin. And I was doing the math. I was like, that was just 79. You guys just saw a 79-yard punt. Roger says, Coach Beamer's special teams played great. The bad PAT snap notwithstanding. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I think it's in the bloodline. Well, it's crazy to see the Carolina special teams performance and then to see the exact opposite. LSU, the only SEC team to lose. Florida State blocking a couple of kicks. LSU muffing a couple of punts. I mean, the fact that LSU was even in the game at all was kind of crazy towards the end, how Florida State just choked it away, dropped the pitch right on the 1-yard line, and then allowed Jaden Daniels to go up the field 99 yards, tie the game, no time left on the clock. Amazing college football game. Amazing college football game. It was almost like the opposite of that backyard brawl opener, where that one was a pretty well-played game on both sides. The LSU-Florida State game was pretty sloppy on both sides, but ended up with all the drama you could ever ask for, including after the game. The LSU All-American wide receiver just erasing everything LSU off his social media. The reports are going to enter the transfer portal. Kayvon Booty. Unbelievable, man. I mean, just stuff you can't make up, right? Can't make up. Well, it's fantastic. All right, let's get more of your comments in here. And again, I got the actual link into the show at the top of the live chat. If you guys want to pop on and just get it all out with me, talk it out with me, you're welcome to do that. If you prefer to type it out, that's fine too. Yeah, Adam, I don't blame you. I'm worrying how we will stop KJ Jefferson from Arkansas. Well, let's check those stats real quick because it is a completely legitimate concern, right? Based in fact, based on what we just saw. Let's go to the team stats. The fact that Georgia State had more yards in total offense than South Carolina, 311 to 306. That's pretty mind-boggling, isn't it? And Georgia State doubles the average yard per carry of South Carolina. They averaged 5 yards per carry. South Carolina averaging 2.5 yards per carry is the massive red flag to me in game number 1. Massive. You all know it. Talked about it after the game. A bunch. Shane Beamer did. But that was what? A D, a C minus game offensively for South Carolina. I don't know how you give it more than a D. When you're an SEC team, you're playing against the Sun Belt team. They got 5 more first downs than Georgia State, but 5 fewer yards in total offense. That's not a good offensive game. And yet you still won the game. So in a lot of ways, ideal from that standpoint. And let me be very clear, after we take the stats down on the video portion of the show, which is always streaming live Monday through Friday, video-wise, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, audio-wise on Podbean there. If you just want to go the old school radio feel, you can do that. But be very careful as we're sitting here on September 6th to extrapolate too much from game number 1. Now, I said it going in, and I still stand by it. We'll know very quickly what kind of offense South Carolina has in game number 1. If you can't run it against Georgia State, hey, it's good. It's very difficult for me to see how you're going to run it against Arkansas, how you're going to run it against Georgia, right? And I absolutely stand by that. That was not what you wanted to see offensively from Carolina at all in multiple ways. Spencer Rattler, I think, was like the 10th highest rated SEC quarterback from a pass efficiency standpoint in game number 1. 2 picks, 1 touchdown. Said he would like to have 1 throwback. I didn't think he was bad, but I thought he looked a lot like a lot of Carolina quarterbacks have looked in the recent past, right? He didn't have a lot of time. The offense just didn't really go. Chris says if not for Rattler extending some of those plays, the offense would have looked a lot worse. Completely agree. Josh says, we won. Let's get better. We know what has to be done. Let's get it done. The offense had moments. It looked great. I don't know about great. Craig says, I think Beamer may need rotator cuff surgery after that windmill celebration. I believe that was that the first one or the second one, the punt block for a touchdown. I'm not even sure. Yeah, Steven, good point. If you don't think special teams aren't important, ask East Carolina and LSU what they think, LOL. Yeah, the poor East Carolina. Poor App State. How about North Carolina and North Carolina State? If you're talking about, if we're zooming out, we're going main takeaways, week 1 of college football. NC State, massively overrated, right? People talking them up about going to the college football playoff, possibly winning the ACC. 13th ranked team in the country going to East Carolina. And South Carolina survived and escaped last year. And North Carolina doing that and then some, with East Carolina missing a potential game-winning field goal in the final seconds, only needing that to go into or to only behind because they already missed an extra point, not too much before that. So those are some of the main takeaways that you have to have if you watch college football in week number 1. Marshawn Lloyd showing us the hype is real. He had a few times he almost broke it with a couple of spin moves. I agree. It's not like he didn't look like he has the potential to be a big-time back, but the offensive line didn't look like they're going to help him. I know the perimeter, a big concern. We'll let you hear more about what Shane Beamer had to say about that as well. John says it was game 1. We had a bland offense, weren't showing too much. This is the mindset that maybe bugs me the most. that the idea that South Carolina had the luxury to go in against Georgia State, a team that, after the game, Shane Beamer did point out that other SEC teams haven't been so fortunate. Well, it was just one SEC team that lost, Tennessee, a couple of years ago. I get it that Auburn, it was a little bit scarier for them last year against Georgia State, and those other fan bases, especially Tennessee, feeling like Beamer took a shot at them and sensitive, and I think that's a great sign for Gamecock football that people pay attention and care about what your head coach is saying after a game that he wins. But don't give me this. We had a bland offense and not showing too much stuff. That is absolutely 100% ridiculous. You only play 12. You can only surprise the other team so much. If South Carolina held anything back in this opener where they get outgained by Georgia State, I said this before the game, then every coach on the staff should be fired. Don't make me go Herm Edwards and you play to win the game kind of thing. It's not just that, though. You got to establish an identity, give your team confidence. If you're saying they don't bust out all the trick plays or something like that, or all the formations that they have in the playbook, of course. But you don't play that game with one arm tied behind your back. That is absolutely erroneous, false, not buying it. Let's see what else you guys got to say. More of the same. Wide receivers can't catch. I don't put it on Rattler. I didn't see a lot of drops. I just saw an offense that never got in a rhythm, much like 10 out of the 12 games last year, 10 out of 13, let's say. North Carolina and Florida. I feel like they got in a rhythm pretty good. Outside of that last year, nothing stands out to me as good, really good offensive performances. Roger says his hometown boy Marcellus Dial from Woodruff, struggled a little bit, but did get his first pick as a Gamecock, which sealed it. Adam says, I am glad we won, though. Attaboy, Adam. If we can't run the ball against Arkansas, we will lose. That's where I wanted to try to make sure we're not doing the transitive property. I find it hard to take a lot of optimism from a game where you can't run against Georgia State and say, yeah, you're going to be able to run the ball against Arkansas. And that was part of what I thought was a kind of strange comment from Shane Beamer after the game. Let's get to that. Explaining some of the offensive struggles. This is a question and answer situation here, too. Let's see what you guys think. This is Shane Beamer after the game, talking about getting outgained. Now, again, 35-14 win for South Carolina. Let's try to keep it in perspective, but certainly when you get outgained by Georgia State in the opener, there are plenty of questions.
What are your main concerns about on the offense?
Well, we got to run the ball better. We can't be 3 of 14 on third down. We can't throw 2 interceptions. There's a lot, to build upon. And having said that, we knew because of their style of defense, it was going to be difficult and that there were going to be some ugly plays tonight. And we told the team that last night, like there's going to be some second and 10s and 2nd and 11s just because of their style. We've got to do a better job of covering people up and just being able to execute our stuff. And I think the biggest thing that we learned tonight and saw tonight is we just need, not that we had too much offense in, but we just really need to narrow down what, Spencer, this is his first year in the offense. And it's not like Luke Doty, who was in this offense last year, and now he's in year 2 and has a better understanding. Spencer's been in this offense for 8 months, and he's not going to have the same understanding and comfort level with it that a quarterback in year 2 would. So we knew that already, don't get me wrong, but I think we just got to continue now that we've been in the game. He's gotten hit some too many times tonight, but just continuing to narrow down with what he's comfortable with and being able to run the ball consistently, because the same people that ran the ball well towards the end of last year in some games is the same group that was out there tonight. We just got to do a better job of executing.
So he knows it wasn't good. The fascinating part to me about that comment was telling the team he knew because of the style of defense Georgia State played that it would be difficult at times to run the football. So it's all I don't get that. I don't get it. If you want to break that down to me from an X's and O's standpoint, I still will never get it, right? If you know there's a certain style coming at you, well, you got to make adjustments, right? I mean, he just told us. He knew what they were going to do defensively. So, and this is why that comment that John put out there earlier just irks me to no end about guys holding things back. I don't think it was that at all. I think it's much more of an execution thing than it is a strategy. So if you know they're going to do something, well, you got to make the chess move to adjust accordingly and get your offense going. I get it. Spencer Rattler's a transfer quarterback. That's what college football is. Southern Cal put up 66 points with a new head coach, right? This was first time they scored that many points in a long, long time. They did that because Lincoln Riley is a really good offensive football coach. Caleb Williams is a good quarterback and has played under Lincoln Riley. I get that. There is a lot more familiarity between those two guys than Spencer Rattler and Marcus Satterfield. I understand. But South Carolina did have the option to play a quarterback that's more familiar with the offense. So that's not an excuse, and it's barely an explanation from where I sit. So it's hard for me to understand what I just heard. If you know what Georgia State's doing, then you got to make the adjustment, and your team's just got to be a lot better than 2.5 yards per carry. That's the difficult thing, I think, to hear for Gamecock fans because you extrapolate it now, right? Arkansas, Georgia, up next. It's not like Arkansas looked like an absolute world beater with that touchdown win against Cincinnati, but Cincinnati did play in the college football playoff last year. Arkansas did get the win. You know they run the football. You know they're going to be ready to stop the run. What does this team do now moving forward? But college football, it's part of the beauty, right? A plus B doesn't always equal C. Josh says Marcel's dial will be solid by the end of the season. Well, I don't understand what you guys are getting at here. That was much more than solid performance from a pass defense. Georgia State went 7 out of 29 passing for 111 yards. The pass defense is the absolute least of the worries right now. Way down the list. The line for Saturday all over the place from 7.5 to 11.5. Daddy-O says, well, I think it opened at 11.5 and everybody got on South Carolina, and that's why it dropped down so quickly. I'm not an expert on that one. JK, good to hear from you, JK. First time, I believe, in on the program. We lost 2 opportunities to have offensive drives due to blocked punts. Oh, that's a weird way to look at it. Let's go back to just the stats here. I'll pop them back up so we're all on the same page. We can all see the same thing here. Let's look at those team stats again. Fascinating way to look at it. I'm trying to look and see if we have total plays going on this sucker. Total offensive plays, exactly the same, 69 and 69. So it's right here in black and white, right? The first report card is in. Again, overall, you win the game, you pass. Satisfactory grade there, right? That's what you had to do. You do what you got to do to win the game. But then we can take a lot more than just what we saw, just what we hear. We watched plenty of college football before. We lost 2 opportunities to have offensive drives due to block punts. True. I think you'll take that one. The question was asked again after the game, too, that only one time did South Carolina score where it wasn't set up in some way by special teams. The fake field goal to start, and the block punts for touchdowns. That's a scary kind of thing. So I think it does say a lot about you, how you see things, and it says a lot about what you say or what you saw. You worry about Vandy. Their offense looks good. Adam, they beat Elon by 11 points over the weekend. Western Kentucky thumped Hawaii, who Vanderbilt had beaten before. Okay, easy, Adam, easy. Steven, I know we probably will have to go through it after the year. Is that what you're saying? But how long can we afford to keep Satterfield and the offensive line coach? All right. Now, this is where you go too far, right? It's game one. The body of work will tell you all you need to know, right? The body of work, not just game number one, but game number one ain't a good start for your offensive coordinator, your offensive line coach, your running backs, your offensive line performance. Not good. Not good on the perimeter from a blocking standpoint. Let's see. I believe Shane Beamer said that very clearly when asked about his concerns. We might have heard from him about that already. He said, just got their butts kicked, is how he put it, on the outside. And again, he understands this better than anybody.
It was really ugly at times, obviously, and we got a lot of work to do. We knew it was going to be a struggle to run the football just because of the way they play defense. We didn't think it was going to be that much of a struggle. So obviously we got to get a lot better there. Just in general, not what we needed to be offensively tonight, and got to get a whole lot better. There's no question about it.
Offensive line specifically.
You guys have talked a lot about that veteran offensive line. What do you think kind of the disconnect was for them tonight?
I don't know if it was disconnect. I mean, it was, gives Georgia State some credit, and we got to coach better. It wasn't like we were doing anything new tonight that we didn't do last year. I mean, the same plays that went up and down the field on North Carolina last year were the same things we were calling tonight. We got to execute better. And again, like you guys have heard me say before, it's not just the offensive line. I mean, I know there's one play we were in a bunch set and we ran the ball and Amari Brown was in the bunch and he got beat inside. And that was a bad looking play. There were some times we're not a big RPO team, but there were some times where frankly they had more guys in the box than we could block. And one of the runs to Marshawn early in the second half when he got hit for no gain, they got more people in there than we can block. Spencer's got to pull that ball and throw it. And it didn't happen enough tonight, so it goes back to us as coaches just continuing to get it where our guys know what the answers are to things and being able to run the ball more consistently.
Pretty fascinating there, huh? I mean, a lot of concerns there. Quarterback doesn't pull the ball in an RPO and throw it when the math is relatively simple. Your wide receivers and tight ends don't win on the outside against Georgia State. How are you going to win against Georgia? But also nitpicking some details there. 21-point win. Year number 2. I think it's a pretty big compliment that Gamecock fans are as concerned as they are, and they should be, about a 21-point win against Georgia State in the season opener in year 2. Under Shane Beamer, having had won a combined 6 games at the end of the Will Muschamp era. So I think you can definitely see it like that. You can also see it as not being satisfied, not being grateful, and the whole thing. I get that. But again, the beauty of college football. After seeing the North Carolina defense, I don't give as much credit for beating them in the bowl game. Florida was terrible too. We haven't beaten a good defense in a long time. Florida was terrible too. Florida just held a top 10 team to 23 points over the weekend. So, Craig, I'm with you about North Carolina giving up 40 in the fourth quarter to App State. Yeah, that does change. That takes a little bit of the shine off that offensive performance in the bowl game. I think that's very fair. The Florida comment is not. The Florida situation seems to me to have been Dan Mullen lost the team that night in Columbia, South Carolina. His career path took a distinct turn Florida getting credit for, deservedly so, looking like one of the best teams in the country, or off to one of the best starts in the country, I should say. They were in position. They took advantage. And number 15, their quarterback, deserves a bunch of that credit. And he's getting it. But, again, game 1 to game 2. Game 1, how does that compare to the other 11 games in the regular season? Who knows? Anthony, how dare you? Running a little late today. Oh, thank you for the apology. Says good morning to the UFAs. Great to have you in, sir. Ken's in as well. Good morning to you, sir. Let's see what else. Who else is in with some thoughts here? Roger back in. I hope they weren't holding back because the game was still up in the air. The offense only scored 2 touchdowns, which isn't going to cut it. Exactly. The Tonester says, don't care who our offensive coordinator is. If your offensive line plays like that, then you're not going to win in the SEC like we hope. Yep, but then you got to coach around it to some degree, don't you? You do shoulder some of the responsibility for the team's execution or lack thereof in this case. Chris says Carolina had the ball about 11 minutes longer than Georgia State, but Georgia State had more offensive explosive plays. Max, good to see you in on the program. Steven Garcia said, not a direct quote, but he thinks it's more misreads rather than complete and utter lack of offensive line talent. And completely understand that, right? But it's still a massive concern. If you have miscommunication or just lack of execution from an offensive line assignment standpoint against Georgia State, how's it going to look against Georgia? How's it going to look against Arkansas in week 2? And yeah, that old coaching cliche, and Shane Beamer brought it up after the game, typically teams improve most from game 1 to game number 2. There's a lot to improve there for Carolina. Nick says it's going to be a long season if the offensive line doesn't turn it around quick. Last season and on Saturday, we don't call plays to our strengths on offense. Well, what's the strength? Help me out with that, Nick. Jason, good morning. Jaheim Bell is the best athlete on offense, isn't he? He ended up leading Carolina in carries. He got set in yards gained running. Sorry. He ran the ball 7 times. Caught the ball 4 times. Targeted 5 times. You try to get that guy double-digit touches. That's what they did. Marshawn Lloyd got double-digit carries. These are your guys, right? The offense just never really got going. And that I think that's massively disappointing coming off the bowl game. But again, our conversation about Gamecock football coming off of the season was really skewed because of that bowl game. It wasn't representative of the entire season at all. I think optimistic Gamecock fans logically were saying, well, if that's what it looked like in the last game of the season, well, maybe they just figured some things out and it can be more like that moving forward, especially you throw in Spencer Rattler, Austin Stogner, some wide receiver pieces, and Juice Wells, who I thought played pretty well. Didn't go out and kill him, but did catch all 7 balls thrown his way for 55 yards. I didn't kill anybody. But it also was showing up and being dependable and a good piece added to the Gamecock offense, no doubt. Designed rollouts would help, Nick says. Okay, I get it. And I think that is where the Gamecock offense can be that much better this year. Spencer Rattler's ability on the outside. Just simple release and arm strength, accuracy on the run. It's good. And he's going to need it moving forward if the first game's any indicator. Three thoughts from week 1, Troy says, resident Clemson fan. I doubt there's ever been a week where Clemson and South Carolina both blocked 2 punts. I doubt any team has ever given up 40 in 1 quarter and still won. And boy, was I wrong about Georgia. Good points there. Let's talk about that Clemson game last night a little bit. Clemson beats Georgia Tech 41-10. To me, this one about equally misleading, not quite as misleading as the Carolina 35-14 final score. 14-7 there in the middle of the third quarter, where DJU does something just kind of uncharacteristic for him that you haven't seen consistently, certainly since that first season where he filled in and he looked like he was just going to be the next guy for Clemson. Last year, he consistently didn't make plays. 2.5 quarters in the last night, he had not made many plays. I would say that he probably missed more plays than he made. I think that's a fair assessment to that point. Third down, critical third down. Looks like Clemson's going to get stopped again. And he's under duress, gets kind of turned around. Will Shipley had been in to block, been on the ground, popped up, and just kind of a couple of yards behind him. He flips it underhand to Shipley. Shipley picks up the first down. And then Clemson just rolls from there. They get the momentum. Georgia Tech's best defensive player is out because of targeting. And Clemson looked a lot more like, I think, what Clemson fans are used to seeing than what you saw for a lot of that game last night, or the majority of the game, 2.5 quarters, and what you saw last year. So what I take away from that thing, Clemson is not going to be dominant unless they get better quarterback play. And Klubnik came in and he looked fantastic, I thought, at the end of the game. How much you can take away from that, I don't know. Right? Georgia Tech, they're done by that point. And no one's going to tell you that Georgia Tech's going to be at the top of the list. That might be my biggest takeaway from that game, is that if Jeff Collins is the Georgia Tech football coach next year, I will be shocked. I mean, you define good coaching by discipline on offense, especially lack of procedure plays, and they just seem to get them time and time again. Like, I like their quarterback, Jeff Sims, athletic, strong. I mean, running over dudes, good arm strength, still has a long way to go. But especially from a lot of Georgia Tech quarterbacks we've seen in the past, like, he's got a chance. He can throw the ball. They got a plan. They got Chris Winkie as the quarterback's coach, Chip Long as the offensive coordinator. I think they can be a lot less embarrassing than they've been. But you can't have so many procedure penalties, man, especially against a good team like Clemson. And the front is not as dominant as it has been. That preseason hype, I think, a little ridiculous because it had been just so good. I mean, like, all-time good. But it is going to be real good. It is real good. And Clemson's going to be a really good football team if they can get better quarterback play consistently. And I didn't see it from DJU most of that game. Maybe that play in the third quarter will change things for him. I don't know. But when you score a touchdown and you're turning and you're looking back to kind of taunt a guy, that's what happened at the end of that drive when they go up 21-7, I believe. And maybe I'm reading too much into that. I don't know. But you get hit and you kind of get turned, and then you kind of lurch at a guy to say, like, look at me, kind of thing. It's that kind of body language to me. I go, whoa, that's a problem. But we'll see. Maybe I'm making too much of that. Let's see what Nick has to say. Georgia Tech defense played great as long as they could, completely gassed. Craig, Clemson and Georgia's defense are the best in the country, hands down. Oh, you're going to leave Alabama out of that? They beat a team that won 11 games last year, 55-0. Just because Alabama's done it forever doesn't mean we can't give them credit. We shouldn't give them credit. I mean, I think Utah State would beat Georgia Tech. They lined up right now. I think that's fair. Troy says DJ looked fair, not great, but the offensive line stunk. So basically, the state of South Carolina right now not pleased with offensive line play. It's really interesting, isn't it? But you see, I think, and Shane Beamer talks about it all the time, and this is some coach speak, no doubt. This is Marshawn Lloyd came out on social media yesterday, said, you guys need to ease up on my offensive line. Those are my guys. But all of that goes into the offense's performance, and sometimes unfairly, an offensive line gets blamed if the offense doesn't go. But quarterbacks can certainly make better decisions. Running backs can break tackles and make big-time plays. But we're not stupid as football fans, okay? I think this goes like to the eye test in college football especially, but it goes, as teams across the country. But it goes to a feel that you get when you watch a football game. If you're not getting a consistent push and the other team is getting consistent pressure, you're getting beat up front. So it's very fair criticism for both Carolina and Clemson fans after week 1. I could absolutely understand where Georgia Tech was going, letting the clock run before half. Their offense isn't great. Clemson's defense is. I think Clemson had a better chance to put points up on the board defensively than Georgia Tech did offensively at that point. Daddy-o, DJU will be in the transfer portal by Halloween. It wouldn't shock me. We've seen stranger things for sure. Yeah, Roger says, my brother, who's a Clemson fan, thinks Klubnik will be starting by the end of the year, but I don't base anything on him mopping up last night looking better than DJU. You don't put any stock into that? It was his very first time playing college football, and he looked like he'd been playing it for years. I put some stock into it. Now, I'm not telling you that I'm giving him a Heisman Trophy, or I'm convinced that he's going to be the starting quarterback. But we could see for our own eyes last night why some college football experts out there have predicted that to happen at some point this season. But if that does happen, I don't think it goes all the way to the end of the year. I think you get another game of what DJU was 2.5 quarters into last night. 2 games max. That's it, man. Give the other guy a chance. Why wouldn't you? And if that don't work out, you can go back to DJ. You have those options. But this is college football at the highest level. And the leash is short. He got last year where no one was pushing him. He is being pushed in a big way this year. That was very un-Clemson-like, Troy says. Our players don't usually do stuff like that. Talking about the DJU flexing. Oh, I agree. You got to give Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney tons of credit for guys playing the game the right way by and large. Now, Gamecock fans want to come back with Ben Boulware and that whole weird Christian Wilkins situation with the goosing back in the day. I get it. And Troy, you gotta understand that happened too. Yeah, Daddy-o, Spurrier would have pulled the trigger in the first half last night. I don't know about that, man. But maybe you're right. Craig's with me, throwing Bama in there. Good, because those 3 teams, you got to give Ohio State a bunch of credit too. They give up 10 points to Notre Dame. I don't think I can take them out of best defenses in the country based off of game 1 performance. But I think you got to go Georgia 1 based off of who they were playing, right? I go Alabama 2, Ohio State 3, Clemson 4. I think that's a very fair comparison. Not just defense. I think you just got to go overall at that point. And again, Alabama fans, you want to get upset about that? I get it. I think it was 55-0, pretty much midway through the third, and mercifully, it kind of cruised from there against Utah State in the opener. DJU looked lost that first quarter. Klubnik looked like a seasoned player. Exactly, Nick. But how much do we take away from that, right? How much do you take away? I do take away a lot from how DJ looked last night. Not as much with Klubnik coming in mop-up time. But it was really, really impressive. Don't get me wrong. And I think you got to agree that from a debut performance, Klubnik's was an A, right? I mean, he could not have looked much better. Let's put it that way. Where do you guys put Spencer Rattler after game number 1? Where do we rate him? Because I think that's a little tricky, isn't it? Game 1, Marcus Satterfield's offensive reputation coming in. Georgia State, right? How much credit do we give them on defense? Wanted to hear a little bit from Rattler what he had to say about his first time ever being at a game at Williams-Brice Stadium, which is kind of hard for me to imagine.
I've never been in a stadium that, packed and with the light show and everything going on, the fans. It was amazing. The Gamecock walk, it was crazy. So just winning in that environment, a win's a win. We came in here, our special teams played great, our defense played great. Now we gotta come along. We had strides, but we're gonna be better. And but a win is a win. We're never gonna be sad to win.
Quarterback echoing the thoughts of the head coach there about that last part especially, and not shying away from the offensive struggles. Here's a little bit more on that from Spencer Rattler.
As a whole, we didn't do too great, but we're going to get better. We're going to, it's our first game together. It happens, and you just got to get better from it, go to practice, do what you got to do to make that stride.
C, I'm thinking is what I would give him. Maybe C plus, B minus. Didn't seem to be put in a lot of positions to make a lot of plays. I mentioned before the game that Carolina's got to run the football in game number 1 especially, and they didn't. And I feel like Marshawn Lloyd and Spencer Rattler's success goes hand in hand. I don't think Spencer Rattler can have a really good season without Marshawn Lloyd and the Gamecocks running the football. I think the reverse is true as well. One has got to open the other, and I don't think we saw either on Saturday night for Carolina football. Again, they won the game by 21 points. I think you can see that as a compliment for the program and the expectation, right? Because we're all doing that. We're all saying, okay, if this against Georgia State, then it's got to be that versus Arkansas and Georgia moving forward. Beating Georgia State's not the standard. You got to beat Georgia State at South Carolina. Daddy-O, September polls are just for talking points. Not sure where that came from exactly. Troy reminding us it took 4 games for Dabo to replace Cole Stout with Deshaun Watson, 4 games to replace Kelly Bryant with Trevor Lawrence. Just saying. Okay, so you're looking at 4 games here. I don't think either one of those guys, I guess Kelly Bryant did get him the college football playoff the year before. Cole Stout never had a full season like DJU did last year. And yeah, it's interesting that Klubnik's being described as Deshaun Watson, but faster, I think, by Dabo Swinney, or just faster than Deshaun Watson. Maybe not. That's probably not a completely fair comparison, and I'm probably misstating that a little bit. Mac Brown should be fired for dancing in the locker room after giving up 40 in the fourth quarter. That was embarrassing. He won't be there in 2 years. All right, Craig, going strong. Jason says you thought Spencer Rattler was going to say, never played with an offensive line so bad. That would not have been a great first impression. That would have been that would be kind of where LSU is to me sitting there today. After, I mean, it was just weird, wasn't it? I've never seen an All-American wide receiver have a ball go through his chest. I mean, him not looking at the ball. Quick slant inside, never turns his head, never gets his hands up. It was like, I know they're not going to throw it to me, Jaden Daniels. I know you're just going to run back there. And social media was hilarious. I mean, just absolutely on fire Sunday night with LSU and Florida State. But as much as Jaden Daniels ran and as little as Booty got targeted as few times, I've never seen that. And just the body language, it was odd. And the reports were they got in a shouting match after the game, Booty and Brian Kelly. and Moody's going to be out. Crazy, man. Let's see more of your comments in here. Mason, good to have you, man. First comment, I believe, in on the program. DJ can't see past his first read. If his first read isn't open, then he doesn't know what to do with the ball. Okay. Several of you weighing in on the Spencer Rattler evaluation. B-, considering how bad the offensive line was, Roger says. Again, I think this goes back to we see the game. I think most of us see the game as checkers when it's chess, right? And then it's really hard for me to figure out what was the miscommunication on the offensive line or between the quarterback and the offensive line that caused issues. Where does the blame lie? It's not all on the offensive line all the time. We know that. But how much is that coaches kind of protecting them, and how much of that is real? It makes me think to hear Shane Beamer after the game talk about, well, now we know we have a better feel for how much to give Spencer Rattler going into the game. Rattler after the game was asked how much of the offense he has, and he said, well, I got all of it. But clearly there are levels to this thing, right? And whatever Carolina did to get to carry on Joyner success, throwing the football, perfect 9 for 9 against North Carolina. Now, maybe it was just playing against a North Carolina defense that gave up 40 against App State in the fourth quarter. Maybe the Georgia State defense is that much better than North Carolina's. I don't know. But it's impossible for me to believe that you can have a guy who didn't attempt to pass in a very weak year at quarterback for Carolina last year step into a bowl game and go 9 for 9 for 160 yards and a couple of touchdowns, and then bring in the preseason Heisman Trophy favorite as your quarterback the next year, and you not have some of the same things set up for him to have success. And for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. Right? And to carry on Joyner not playing in the opener was kind of odd. We just randomly got told we would kill Will Muschamp for this, right? Oh, Muschamp never tells anybody anything. All of a sudden, to carry on Joyner has an injury, doesn't play. Well, a calf injury, apparently keeping to carry on Joyner out of this ball game. Corey Rucker not playing on the outside with an injury as well. How much does that go into the lack of Carolina's success on the perimeter? Ultimately, it doesn't matter, right? Injuries happen to everybody. You got to adjust and overcome. DC says I give Rattler a 6 out of 10, a C+. I think very fair. Chris, I think the defenses continue to get better. If not for that one long run, we would have kept them under 100 yards total. Completely agree. And the adjustments after the first drive, how Georgia State just kind of marched that thing right down the field. But after that, it was much more difficult. I don't think it was a great game defensively. Don't get me wrong. Georgia State should not outgain your offense, but giving up, 311 total yards, 7 out of 29 passing. The defense is clearly the strength of this team. I guess you got to say special teams is clearly the strength of this team after game number 1. Troy says, Craig, I guess he's saying a win is a win. Yeah, there's a lot of that. He showed flashes of what makes him great. Spencer Rattler is who Nick is talking about. Made some right throws under pressure and on the run. Also made some head scratchers, forcing into coverage. And when he had somebody open on a check down, Juju McDowell is who Nick saw wide open. Troy agreeing with Mason about DJU's vision as his biggest weakness. And they might have a few DBs out this week, Craig's saying. I'm not sure who you're talking about on that one, Craig. Trying to keep up while giving you gas baggy hot takes. It's hit and miss sometimes. Florida, massive win. Let's talk about Florida real quick. And Florida State, really, right? Both massive wins to start the season. Florida's being more important for a few reasons. First of all, is Billy Napier's first game. It was at home against a top 10 opponent. Secondly, it was a coming out party for Anthony Richardson, who looked like one of the best players in college football. Because to do that against a Sun Belt team, no offense to Georgia State, but it is what it is, right? To do that against a much lower level team is one thing. To do that against the defending Pac-12 champs, number 7 ranked team in the country, is another. And maybe Utah's not going to be that this year. But we all saw the plays too, right? I mean, that pump fake spin, somehow get out of trouble, roll right, throw a dime. That's what Florida quarterbacks have done forever. That's why Florida has been one of the best college football programs in the country for a long time. That's not what you got from Felipe Franks on a consistent basis. It's not what you got last year either. Emory Jones wasn't that guy. He was kind of an electric athlete, but much more running the football than making plays, keeping a play alive, and then throwing for touchdowns. Anthony Richardson certainly looks like he can be that guy. And Florida's defense looked pretty legit too. So I think bigger kudos there than to Florida State, because LSU didn't play well at all. You can't give a team a ton of credit when the other team muffs 2 punts. You do give them credit for blocking punts. I mean, blocking a field goal attempt, an extra point when it mattered the most. You get zero credit for dropping a pitch on the 1 yard line, where all it would have taken was a field goal to seal the game in the final seconds. Then you allow LSU's offense to go 99 yards in less than a minute. Whew. But Florida State does look improved. No doubt about it. They had a lot of room to improve, though. So much more impressed with Florida over the weekend. Sorry, Sam Pittman is who Craig was talking about. Yeah, I did see that. A few DBs out this week at Arkansas. Thank you, Craig. Whoa, RL, you gotta tell me about this now. You missed the game. Which game are we talking about? You're talking about the South Carolina game. You went to the East Carolina game and had a barbecue after. That's pretty awesome if you were at that East Carolina game. Looked pretty tremendous for sure. Chris, first, I told you so of the season. Told you Friday I'd take Florida at home, LOL. Rising throwing that pick when they only needed a field goal was unacceptable. Craig says, yeah, that was a heck of a play by Florida's defense. I mean, the diving, scooping it off the turf by a few inches. Yeah, you don't want your quarterback to do that for sure. I don't know about unacceptable. It wasn't a good play. Florida's quarterback also wearing 15. It's all in the number, Chris says. Nick says thought Florida looked dang good, especially with it being Napier's first game as a head coach. Craig, didn't Brian Kelly say he wanted to execute the entire team? I don't know if he said that after the game. That's an old coach's line. How was your execution? I'm for it. And this is why I'm fascinated to continue to see how this works, right? Because what I saw on social media, Brian Kelly's the stepdad that LSU needs to, I guess, instill some discipline to get that program turned back around. Well, there's that. It could go that way, or it could go, he's the stepdad that tried to be the disciplinarian and it just didn't work, right? That seems to be where he's at right now. RL. There's only one reason my plans changed so suddenly. I had to go see about a girl. Had an awesome time. Good for you, sir. Good for you. Nick says Brian Kelly looked like he saw a ghost the entire game on the sidelines, bug-eyed and stone-faced. See, I don't mind the calm sideline demeanor. I mean, Shane Beamer was anything but, right? The block punt for a touchdown and doing a jig on the sidelines, going nuts. I forget who mentioned it before. Concerned about the rotator cuff. That's who he is. You got to be who you are. Brian Kelly's not that guy, right? That's why the social media videos of him dancing with players, and that's why those are so weird. York says he's still recovering. Good for you, York. From the tailgate. 7:30 a.m. start. Now, that's a rookie move, York. I know you had everything ready to go. I thought you were an experienced veteran, but to start a 7:30 p.m. game at 7:30 a.m. with the tailgate, it's either a rookie move or like you are the most experienced tailgater of all time just at a level that I can't even understand. So maybe we'll give you the benefit of the doubt on that one. But if you're still recovering today, missed out on a few waters. So back to Carolina concerns here as we roll into hour number 2. Actually, I'll give you my take on the concerns and maybe the proper perspective to have them in this morning, as I see it only. And I'm wildly interested in hearing yours. But first, need to tell you about a sponsor of the program, Freedom Primary Care, who I trust to care for my family. And right now, the emphasis on the freedom part of healthcare and making your own choices, being in charge of your own health. Never thought that would be a thing. That's a thing now. And Freedom Primary Care is certainly where I can see eye to eye and feel very comfortable about them taking care of me and my family. Give them a call at 803-627-2447. Freedom Primary Care up in Fort Mill, South Carolina, right around the corner from me, but they have telemedicine options. So wherever you might be, Freedom Primary Care could certainly be exactly what you're looking for as well. They're responsible to you, not for you. That is a very important distinction, the way that I approach healthcare, and I think a lot of responsible adults out there do as well. You're not looking for magic from a healthcare professional. You're looking for proper advice and help, and for them working with you, giving you some guidance. If you want to go the more naturally minded way, they'll give you that route of care. If you want to go the more conservative, traditional path of care, they can do that too. That's why I put my trust and I trust my family to be cared by Freedom Primary Care. I suggest you check them out as well. 803-627-2447. Please support those that support the program. Really appreciate your support here on a Tuesday morning after the long weekend. Certainly hope Labor Day went well for you. I got to spend it with a lot of family, extended family, kids running around. Great weekend, taking the kids to the season opener. And before we get into the nerdy X's and O's concerns and the whole thing, I'll show you my vantage point, by the way. And when Kirk Herbstreit retweets the Gamecock football social media video that was at Travion Kenyon on Williams-Brice Stadium on the field, and then the view of, I think it was the first sandstorm hitting, right where the lights go out and the light. Here was my view of this thing. I hope you guys, if you were there, I know you got to experience it as well, but I don't think it's something that we can just completely dismiss or not even acknowledge here on the first program after the environment at Williams-Brice Stadium got kicked up a notch. All the kids loved it too. You can see there at the end. It wasn't just the kids, obviously. I mean, we all turn into kids at football games in a lot of ways. But man, I went to my first Carolina football game when I was like 3 years old, so like 1981. And now here we are 40 plus years later, seeing that presentation, I think is what they call about it. That's what the athletics department ends up calling it, right? Our presentation, game presentation. It was pretty mind-boggling to see where things have come at Williams-Brice Stadium. And if you want to be a hater and say that there was a long way to go or it's just silly lights and the whole thing, go right ahead. But the official attendance for the season opener, 78,297. And I thought it might have been one of those things where somehow you get numbers skewed a little bit, but I was at the game and it was packed. And to see that after seeing the end of the Will Muschamp era is come so far. Chris says those lights gave me goosebumps. They are absolutely amazing. In a lot of ways, that is what you got to have in college football in 2022 to compete at the highest level. And I'm talking about not just on the field, but it's certainly in there, right? And it's got to be a recruiting tool. And then you got to get people in the seats, because we all understand the comforts of home and technology and being able to watch multiple games and the whole thing. I know that's the main complaint from Gamecock fans who were there. Now you got to, if you can up the Wi-Fi availability in stadium, so we can all, we're all addicted to our phones and we're checking scores or whatever. I was definitely doing it. My 9-year-old was sitting right to my right. He was wanting to know the updates on Ohio State and Notre Dame, and it was difficult to get my very classy phone to work, but it was interesting to see that I wasn't the only one. Well, no one's been to a game like that, Chris. He said, my son told me that he's never been to a game like that. He said it was nothing like last year. No one at South Carolina has been to a game like that. But there is no other environment like that in college sports. Like, Sandstorm has become a thing, a really unique thing to South Carolina. Now, I get it. Other stadiums do play it, but that's South Carolina's thing right now in college football. Nick says the game day environment at the stadium Saturday night was unbelievable, was one of the coolest experiences I've had there, not including any crazy wins. It's true, Troy, but it's not just that. I know you're the resident Clemson fan, but you got to understand, South Carolina didn't just beat North Carolina. He says it's amazing what a bowl win can do for a fan base. That is Troy, you're really good normally about being pretty fair and seeing things kind of down the middle, or reasonably, for sure. But you understand that ain't it. It had a lot to do with it, right? It had a lot to up the optimism and enthusiasm, that bowl win against North Carolina, scoring a bunch of points en route doing it. But this, to me, is more who Shane Beamer is and how he has distinguished the South Carolina football program, how he has made it unique, how he's put his own stamp on it. Yeah, I get it. Spencer Rattler was a high-profile transfer. That goes into it too, but I think Shane Beamer deserves the credit for this as much as anything else. Now, also, the fact that Gamecock football fans are just really good fans to begin with. Just are. Always have been. Never won that much, but have always been there. I'm not breaking news here. Nick says, I've been to more than 140 games in that stadium. It was amazing. And that's what, if you don't know, then you don't know. No, how loud it was, Chris is saying, not the lights. To me, the noise was what the noise is at Williams-Brice Stadium. And again, I think that is a massive compliment to Shane Beamer to get it back to where it had been, and a lot of, I think, Gamecock fans feel like it should be, as quickly as he's gotten it back. Anthony says the lights and new sound system were superior. My little girl was going crazy, but the 2 hours stuck in traffic was horrible. Hey, man, that's all part of it. So 4:44, I think, is when I pulled within a mile-ish on Bluff Road and sat in that mile for solid 30-plus minutes pregame. 7:30 kick, it's 4:44, and there's a bunch of traffic. Hey, exactly, York. Folks mad about something will be mad about everything. I went to some of those games during the COVID year, right, and cruised right in the ghost town and felt so weird, so alien. It was an alien experience to have hardly anybody in the stadium, to have It's so quiet around the stadium before the game. So to me, I kept trying to remind myself, while not loving sitting and going nowhere 30 minutes before the game, and highly concerned about not getting my kids there for the Gamecock walk, which I think is the highlight, and I think turned out probably to be certainly one of their highlights. They got a high five from Shane Beamer as he's rolling by, right? They loved it. And that was one of the goals, to get the kids there for that. They made it, but just barely. So while I was concerned about all that and not loving sitting in traffic, just like all of you, just like anybody who was sitting in there, I was trying to appreciate it for being back, right? For not being what it had been the last several years. Troy says, not saying I'll ever pull for South Carolina, but Clemson needs the Gamecocks to get good again. For that matter, Miami, Florida State, and Virginia Tech. Really? Why? You don't. The last several years has proven it. Was it 6 years in a row in the college football playoff? Those 6 years, South Carolina wasn't good. Clemson doesn't need that. Now, you might need it to feel better about rubbing it into your rival, or to get a little more leeway, for sure. Dave Pash last night on the broadcast on ESPN, saw some social media chatter about this too, mentioned that Clemson has one of the best schedules in the country every year. I knew that just wasn't going to play for Gamecock fans especially. Chris, great point, man. No traffic at 2 o'clock. LOL, you got to get there earlier. Good for you, sir. Well done. And traffic getting out wasn't bad. And Anthony, the only real response to the 2 hours stuck in traffic was horrible is go to other places, go to other football games, and you rarely get in and out as well as you do in Columbia. I hear you, Troy. And this year, we've been over it. Max says, go elsewhere. Yeah, exactly. You get tired of hearing, don't play anybody. It's a little different this year, but the ACC, you would guess, certainly not the big winner of this weekend. Florida State inching that thing out against LSU doesn't make up for NC State's struggles against East Carolina and North Carolina, nearly getting knocked off in Boone and giving up 40 points in the fourth quarter. Just mind-boggling. But it's part of the beauty of college football too. Just the beginning. Just the beginning. So I mentioned I was going to try to give you guys the proper perspective, what I think my perspective is for the Gamecock offense. And let's see if we can get another quick yes. This summed it up for me from Shane Beamer's perspective after the game from the Carolina offensive production.
What are your main concerns about on the offense?
Spurrier-esque, isn't it? He didn't quite get the P on the well. It wasn't a welp. It was pretty dang close. And just that nonverbal. Is it verbal if you make the sound effect? It's just it's got to be a word to be verbal, doesn't it? That physical reaction of just, oh gosh, man. Well, I mean, Spurrier would have been so ticked off. You guys remember when South Carolina beat North Carolina in the opener? That was who was the starting quarterback? That was the Connor Mitch game, right? Where he started his first game, and it was dang near his last one. Offense was pretty brutal. And the punter was the big story. Spurrier, never forget him going in, or he's coming out, right? So he'd already done his press conference. He was clearly, not pleased, happy to get a win, relatively satisfied to get a win against North Carolina, but I think he knew there. This was the first game of that last season, right, in 2015. Yep. Had to go brag on my punter, as he was saying, because I think it was weirdly set up there in Bank of America, and maybe it's just because they don't let the opposing coaches go where the NFL guys, I don't know, but he was coming back by through the media workroom, I think, after he left the press conference or something like that. I just remember it was, kind of unofficial, but it was just the deflation and the kind of like the disgust of his own offense, having to brag about a punter in a post-game press conference. Shane Beamer's not Steve Spurrier. He was plenty pleased to talk about, and should have been, a couple of punt blocks for touchdowns, how he'd never even been a part of that in all the years of being around great special teams. But there is plenty to be concerned about from the Carolina offensive perspective. Let's put those numbers out. This is not a made-up boogeyman, right? This is black and white. Hey, here are the numbers. Let's look at them. Team stats. Total yards on offense, 311 for Georgia State, 306 for South Carolina. Exact number of offensive plays, 69 for each team. 2.5 average per rush for South Carolina, double that for Georgia State at 5 yards per rush. These are massively concerning numbers. And I can't tell you before the game that Carolina's got to run the football against Georgia State, or they're not going to have a chance to run it against Arkansas or Georgia, and then come out of that thing and say, well, maybe this or that, and there was some miscommunication, and that was the first game, and it's going to be okay. I can't tell you that, man. I can tell you that there is still a chance it improves. And hearing Shane Beamer say teams improve most from game 1 to game number 2, there's a possibility, and maybe it can be a situation where Spencer Rattler was confused or unclear, did not know exactly what he needed to do when certain looks were presented to him. And that's why you saw what you saw. But that sounds a little bit too pie in the sky to me. That sounds way too oversimplified. I'm sure Spencer Rattler can be better, and there are things, and hearing Shane Beamer say after the game that now they have a better understanding of everything they put into this game from an offensive game plan perspective and how they need to narrow that down to refine that now moving forward to be more effective on offense. Yes, absolutely. Makes sense. But they also knew that going into the game. I mean, they hadn't seen it in an actual game, but they'd seen practice. And I'm sure they tried to simulate all of this. And what do they call them? They didn't call it, don't call it a scrimmage, a preseason scrimmage, right? A preseason game, I think is what they called it, those scrimmages. Well, you're responsible as the coaching staff to have a really good idea of that going in. And you don't get a pass, and you don't get a do-over. But you're not limited to looking like that the rest of the season either. And how much credit do you give Georgia State? I think for those of us who follow college football, you give them 25% of the credit maybe. I think that's fair. 25% of the credit goes to a Georgia State defense that has been pretty good in the Sun Belt. And then you got to give 75% of the responsibility for not looking good on offense to the Gamecock offense. Offensive coordinator being number one, bearing the responsibility. I don't see how you can look at that thing any differently. But I am interested to hear how you're looking at it. Nick Spurrier, well, that's why we're losers, always stuck out to me as one of the most honest coaching answers when asked about offensive performance. Can't remember what game it was. I don't remember that one was either. Chris says they were who we thought they were. See, that's the thing, Chris. I don't think they were. You're talking about the Gamecocks? Because we knew the offensive line, the names and the players hadn't changed, right? But what we didn't know going into Saturday's opener was how much a quarterback with the talent level of Spencer Rattler could change an offense, could help an offense, could make that offense go compared to what you saw last year. And I saw that Jason Brown didn't get any running for Virginia Tech. He seemed like the sideline rally guy, or he was like head sideline leader. I was watching that game against Old Dominion that Virginia Tech didn't even win, by the way. Another ACC can't be a big winner coming out of week number 1. But the Carolina transfer up to Virginia Tech didn't get to play, didn't win that job. But I was just trying to think, like, all right, last year's quarterbacks get a pretty bad rap, right? Zeb Nolan doesn't get much credit for being as serviceable, I think, as he ended up. I wonder how we'll see those guys. How we'll see Luke Doty playing through injury. How we'll see Zeb Nolan and Jason Brown and even Dakereon Joyner in the bowl game now after Spencer Rattler gets a full season under his belt or a full shot at it. Because you didn't see an improved offense. You just didn't. And that is a massive concern. Now, 25%, I think, is the fair way to look at it. Georgia State, good for you. But I can't give them more than 25% of the credit. The bulk of it goes to the South Carolina staff, players, for not executing at a high level. And you're going to have to execute at high levels to even be in the games of 4, to even be in 4 games this year is how I broke it down. And now I think we can make that 6, can't we? I make that 6, and maybe you can go 8. Maybe you can go all 8, right? I kind of broke the game down preseason-wise, or the season down for South Carolina in 3 different categories. Games you should win: Georgia State, Charlotte, South Carolina State, Vanderbilt. Games you probably should lose: Clemson, Texas A&M, Arkansas, and Georgia. And then 4 in the middle: Tennessee, Florida, Missouri, and Kentucky. But now, having seen week 1, I think it slides much more to the games you're certainly not going to be favored in. You're not going to be favored to beat Florida in Florida now after what we saw in week number 1, unless some crazy stuff happens. Arkansas opened as a double-digit favorite for a reason. It's also come down from there, too, for a reason. Tennessee, they did what South Carolina did, right? They started the game on defense, and they had scored, was it 10 seconds into the game? First play pick, first offensive play touchdown. That offense ain't slowing down. And we saw that matchup last year, and it was embarrassing from the Gamecock perspective. You're talking about their defense, Chris. They were who we thought they were. Okay. To me, I don't think the Gamecock offense was what South Carolina fans thought it was going to be in game number 1. And I think it's very fair for Carolina fans to be frustrated / worried, concerned about things moving forward. I think it's fair for Clemson fans to feel that way too, with what you saw from your starting quarterback last night and how long it took to get things going against a Georgia Tech team that I don't think any of us feel like is going to be much improved. Was it 3-win seasons the last 3 years? Again, Jeff Collins, when he speaks, I can get on board the motivation and the whole thing, but when I watch a team consistently just have false start penalty after false start penalty against a really, really good team in game number 1 in your own hometown, that's tough, man. Tough. Good stuff from Anthony. Says, it's been a way worse situation. 9-year-old's phone died. She was mega bored, so she wanted to work a nerve. Nick says Columbia is actually rated one of the better schools for traffic control when entering and exiting the games. There was a top 25 list on that last season. Carolina was like number 5. Yeah. And that happens when you set the bar high. I wanted them to play well, but some folks had a blowout or bust on their minds. Yeah, and I think that those were the unrealistic fans going in, right? I put the game at 30-21. I thought it was going to be a bit of a struggle. I was and remain unconvinced that this year's South Carolina offense is going to be that much improved over what I saw last year, because I hadn't seen it. And Spencer Rattler didn't show me enough in what he had done in his Oklahoma career. And certainly Marcus Satterfield hasn't shown me that in his offensive coordinator career. His answer to the question about being criticized and coming off kind of defensively before that first game, like I'd like to see a lot of other offensive coordinators would have done with the quarterback situation we had last year, to me was a bad sign, right? I feel like if you're confident about what you're doing, then you say, yeah, it was not what we wanted last year. There is a ton of room to improve. I got to get better. I know that. And I'm confident that the guys that we have this year will help us move forward as an offense kind of thing, as opposed to, yeah, well, I don't know if anybody else could have done better last year. Craig, heck of a first game prediction, man. 35-13. You're right on it. If you predicted 2 of those as punt blocks for touchdowns, I'd be really impressed, right? There. If I would have seen 35-14 as the final score, I would have probably told you that you would feel a little bit better, I think, about things moving forward as Gamecock fans. I would have told you that would have meant that running game would have got on track and Spencer Rattler would have had a pretty good game, would have looked very much in control of the offense, and the offense kind of headed right, picking up in a lot of ways where they left off against North Carolina. But that's not what we saw. We saw a bit of a smoke and mirrors 35-14 win with special teams being elite because you had more talented guys out there, right? We heard it from Shane Beamer after the game. We knew we had a depth and talent advantage, and we were going to play a lot of guys and use those things to their advantage, and they did. They're not going to have depth and talent advantages the next 2 weeks. I think at best you're even with Arkansas, and I think most people would say, no, Arkansas gets the nod there. Not overwhelmingly, but Arkansas on paper, they're favored. Again, it opened up double digits for a reason. They just beat Cincinnati. Wasn't an overwhelmingly impressive victory. I think from a Gamecock perspective, that's pretty much exactly what you wanted to see, right? You wanted to see a team that could be beat, but you didn't want to see them get beat in week number 1. You didn't want to see a team kind of back against the wall type feeling already in their SEC opener in week number 2. And also, if we zoom back again in the proper perspective, or my perspective, I feel like you got to have for the Gamecocks in week number 2, going into week number 2, it might have been what you wanted to see as well. The concern, seeing a well-oiled offensive machine in week number 1, is having the feel that you got everything figured out. And it will be like it was against Georgia State, against Arkansas, as opposed to, oh, wait a second. Don't let me do that. Let's let Shane Beamer do that again.
What are your main concerns about on the offense?
When your head coach is doing that in the post-game press conference, you got a week in front of you at practice, don't you? And you're going to be hearing about it. And obviously, you're not just going to be hearing about it from him. These players also, Marshawn Lloyd took to social media yesterday to defend his offensive line for a reason, right? And so you've got that motivation now for Carolina rolling into week number 2, which can be a good thing, which can lead into why you can't go A plus B equals C ever in college football. But I think especially this week, from the Gamecock offense perspective, because I'm not going to be shocked if they play a better offensive game against Arkansas than they did against Georgia State. I'm not going to be shocked. I'm not going to predict it to happen, but I'm not going to be shocked if it does happen. We've seen it many times before, and you see it all the time in college football, and it's part of what makes it great, right? Also, what you saw from South Carolina, the presentation, the season opener in general. Let's get more of that reaction from Shane Beamer after the game Saturday night.
There was really good in all 3 phases. There was some bad in all 3 phases. We've got to play and coach and play better going forward. But, my dad used to always say this, and I've heard it from a lot of people. You make the most improvement as a football team between week 1 and week 2. And we've got a lot to improve before we go out to Arkansas next week. But, to not play great and to win against a really good football team by 3 touchdowns, we're going to celebrate the hell out of that. So we ain't ever apologizing for winning around here. That's an excited, joyful locker room. Those kids deserve it for all the work they've put in since January. And, it was a great night in Columbia for the home opener, and can't wait to get back to work.
I think that's exactly what you want to hear, right? Man, Shane Beamer has made it a thing, at least to my ear, to hit the right notes in his public comments. Craig says, I think Arkansas is a year ahead of us as far as recruiting and depth of roster. I think that's a fair way to put it. And what we've seen on the field, you might hope that Arkansas is a year ahead, right? If South Carolina is beating a team in the college football playoff to open the season next year, I don't think they're going to face one of those off the top of my head. But preseason ranked top 25, a guy with a dark horse type Heisman Trophy contender playing quarterback like KJ Jefferson is, that would be a good place to be. That would show continued improvement for sure. But I think, Craig, you might be a little bit ahead of yourself there. I'm instead of thinking that Arkansas is a year ahead, and maybe hoping or predicting. So it would take, what would that take then? Wouldn't take a win necessarily at Arkansas or against Georgia, but it would take wins, I think, against 3 or 4 of those what I made toss-up games, right? Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Missouri. Or maybe an upset against Texas A&M, or one of those other games that on paper you're going to be a big underdog to. Georgia, Clemson, and Arkansas now. So that is where the easy preseason take of, I think they're going to be an improved team, but don't know if their record's going to be better. That's where it falls in line right now. Is that what we saw in week number 1? Did we see that Saturday night? Did we see an improved team? I think we did overall. Because you won a game by 3 touchdowns. I think last year's Troy team, pretty comparable. I think Georgia State actually whipped up on Troy last year. But remember, South Carolina beat Troy by 9 points at home last year. I think that game was very similar to what we saw against Troy, except for the punt blocks for touchdowns. But a 21-point win certainly is much better than a 9-point win. So I think you saw improvement, but not a ton, right? I think you saw a better quarterback, but not a ton. I don't think you saw a better running game or a better offensive line. I don't think you saw a better defensive line. I think it's fair to go back on the other side too. No sacks on Georgia State. Now, I think that is a very X's and or black and white way to look at a defense and evaluate them, and probably very elementary, and I get that. 7 out of 29 with an interception, 111 yards for an offense is pretty putrid. So the Gamecocks, from a passing defense perspective, they were good. But to give up 5 yards a carry against Georgia, to me, pretty unacceptable. Give up more than 200 yards on the ground. Or right, I guess it was 200 exactly if you go with the net yardage. Not good enough from the Gamecock perspective. And so that's my overall takeaway, I guess. Good, not good enough. And I think Shane Beamer knows that. I think Gamecock players know that. Pete Limbo, fantastic, right? You're going to see the awards are starting to roll in if they haven't already. Special teams, player of the week. Mitch Jeter sticking a 53-yard field goal, his first attempt. Got to give him a ton of credit, right? Now, it was the bad snap on the extra point. It wasn't a perfect special teams game, but it was an A game, A-plus kind of game. And they did hit the quarterback a lot. Okay, that's fair, Chris, but there weren't a lot of tackles for loss. And so I don't think the defensive line gets a tremendous grade. I'm seeing three guys who had any kind of lost yardage in the Georgia State rush game. So it wasn't massively disruptive. It certainly was not good enough. I think Arkansas flips on the tape and it's got to feel pretty good. Don't you? But that's where you want Arkansas to be in a lot of ways if you're a South Carolina fan. You don't want them going the opposite way. So that's part of the main takeaway of week number 1, college football for me. Did it look like a divide? It kind of, I guess I can't say that with Notre Dame keeping it as close as they did against Ohio State. For that final score to be as low as it was, I think that's maybe one of the more surprising parts about week 1 is that Ohio State, Notre Dame, the over-under was somewhere around 60. They score combined 31 points. I know Joey Galloway on College Football Final had that as his virtual lock of the week. The over in that game. Oof. So I think you got 5 teams that seem really, really good in college football. Who would that 6th team be? I don't think you got one. But how much do we know after week number 1? And how much will that change quickly? I think the LSU situation only got more fascinating. How that went down. Not that they lost. They were, a 3-point favorite going in against Florida State. Not that they lost the game, how they lost the game, and where it goes from here. Florida's start, massively impressive. And Anthony Richardson, probably the biggest winner, I think, in week 1. Probably took the highest jump in stock, don't you think? Was there a single player out there that did it more than Anthony Richardson? I don't think so. Maybe the Notre Dame defense as a whole, holding Ohio State to 21 points, keeping them in the game as well as they did. Alabama seems to be who we thought they were going to be. I guess the Georgia defense, you got to put them way up there too, right? That dominating performance, maybe not even Georgia defense, just Georgia in general. If you were buying any of that preseason talk about Georgia losing 15 guys to the NFL, it's going to be really hard to replace them in the whole thing. How ridiculous does that look after that opener? And I mentioned it multiple times how that was the talk around Clemson after they lost their first national championship game to Alabama back in the day. Oh, they got so much to replace. 7 starters on defense at the time, or 7 guys who went at the NFL off the defense. Those programs aren't replacing. They're reloading. And we saw that on Saturday. But we also got a all over the place, right? College football weekend in general. Backyard brawl, great way to start. A few games on Friday, nothing really worth mentioning. Was that the Indiana-Illinois night? I think it was. It was a pretty good game. But then on Saturday, it looked like NC State had that game well in hand. It looked like North Carolina had their game well in hand, and then you get the massive comebacks and almost massive upsets. You got thumping in the 3:30 game with Georgia over Oregon. You got a much closer, much more competitive, good Arkansas-Cincinnati game at 3:30 than the night games. Notre Dame, Ohio State nationally much better, much more competitive than I think a lot of people thought. That Carolina-Georgia State game in doubt for a lot longer than Gamecock fans would have hoped. Florida, what they were able to do against Utah, probably the game of the week in a lot of ways, with a top 10 opponent, a first-year head coach, a perennial powerhouse program, a quarterback really introducing himself on the national scene, shoving himself right in the Heisman Trophy race immediately. It was that good a game. Those were that one play specifically was that good a play to get out of trouble, show off the athleticism, and make the play. And then Sunday night, college football at its finest. Perennial powerhouse programs, a shell of themselves in a lot of ways, mistakes all over the place, drama all over the place. Dramatic conclusion down to the last second, inbounds, out of bounds, blocked extra point after a muffed toss, 99-yard drive. I mean, you can't make that stuff up. You can't. And it's why we love college football the most. That's why I do. Troy, you were buying what? One of your three things from week number one? I got to go back up to that now. You did have three big takeaways you gave us, Troy. And one of those, what are you saying you were buying? I like that we're disagreeing here. That's a long one. Oh, there we go. Doubt there's ever been a week where Clemson and South Carolina both blocked 2 punts. Doubt any team has ever given up 40 in the first quarter and still won. And boy, was I wrong about Georgia. Yeah. Okay. So Troy admitting that he was wrong. This is why Troy and I get along so well. Admitting he was buying into it. See, I think a lot of people might have been hoping, but if you were paying attention, I think you knew. And again, maybe that win will turn out to be much less impressive as we go this season for Oregon. That's another thing that the college football season teaches us year in and year out, doesn't it? And a lot of times week in and week out. What you thought you know, you don't know. Roger, Carolina did win out in Fayetteville the last time they played there in 2013, but they were one of two permanent West opponents for years, and Carolina only won in 97 and 2005. It has been perennially a very difficult place for Carolina to play well. That 2013 game being the clear exception. That was the week after Carolina had played Wofford, I believe, and Jadeveon Clowney had sat out, and Steve Spurrier wasn't happy about it and ended up having to apologize the week of that Arkansas game, right? He called Clowney out after the game for not communicating that there was an injury situation. And it was a bit of a mess from the outside looking in, except it wasn't at all. And Carolina went and absolutely thumped Brett Bielema and company. And after the game, Spurrier says, yeah, I told him afterwards, it's tough to get your butt beat. It's no fun getting your butt beat. Who was the quarterback that scored on the ground that day? It was only Carolina touchdown. He got converted to a tight end later and then transferred to Boston College. And the name's not even popping in my head right now. Maybe you guys can help me out with that. Yeah, not exactly a happy place for South Carolina. 1999, I believe I went out to the game in Little Rock, and it was over real quick. It was not pretty at all. And it's the only time I've ever gone to Arkansas for a game. Watching the Hogs get called, and man, it was That was something. I want to say Michael. It's not Scarnecchia. It's something like that. You guys helped me out. It was. Oh, I apologize if you're yelling at the show now. Now I got to go back and look at the box score if you guys aren't going to help me out. 2013, Arkansas, South Carolina. Kid that scored. We'll see who's going to win this little game. You guys can beat me. It's a fun game. Ah, yes. Well done, DC. You beat me. Brendan Nosovich. Well played. Brendan Michael, same kind of thing. So I think overall, main takeaways from South Carolina. If you were predicting 9-3, 10-2 craziness, I would have told you before the season that was way too optimistic. But I think after game number 1, I think you see it, don't you? I think you got to see it. You got to come back down to reality. I get it. The North Carolina Bowl game was tremendous, but you just saw what North Carolina did, giving up 40 points in the fourth quarter. And you got to understand the program's projected trajectory. You might have taken it way up too soon. Jason, good to hear from you this morning, sir. He says the South Carolina defense can still be better if the offense can just help a little, limit punts, hold the ball longer. The offense still holding the defense back at times, if that makes sense. It absolutely does make sense. And Chris, I think doing the math right now just to get to 7-5 is a bit of a challenge, right? If you go with my math and you separate those things into 3 categories, you got to win 4 games. It's going to be very difficult to win 4 games. And then you got 4 toss-ups. You still got to win 3 out of those 4. And that's Tennessee and Florida as toss-ups on the road at the Swamp this year, by the way. And DC, everybody feels like they're going to improve right now in college football. Everybody has to improve in college football right now to get where they want to go. Nick Saban, I'm sure, said that after the game. Even though it was a dominating performance, I'm sure Kirby Smart is trying to sell that to his team that you got to get better. How you can look much better than that first week for either one of those teams is a difficult thing for me to wrap my little brain around. But I think for this program at this time, having heard a lot of really good things in the offseason, right? Having gotten a lot of encouragement and support, optimism, enthusiasm. First of all, the players in the program deserved it. Like, it was about time, because I'm sure they heard a lot of the exact opposite for the several years before, and that could not have been fun. So I feel good for them, how they earned that, especially with the bowl game win, beating Florida, beating Auburn last year, getting above 500. It was a pretty massive accomplishment. But as far as becoming relevant nationally in college football, still a long ways to go. And I think week 1 showed that. Now, you got to improve a bunch between week 1 and week 2 to be competitive. And again, to me, that is the benchmark for year number 2 in Shane Beamer's tenure at South Carolina. You got to close the gap on the field between the country's best team and where your program is. Oh, completely agreed, Nick. I still think 7 wins is achievable. The offensive line just had to turn it around and turn it around fast. Defense and special teams can keep us in games, but you can't win if we can't score any friggin' points. Absolutely achievable. 8, 9 wins. It's achievable. It's possible. It's just the margin for error, and so many things got to go your way. You're not going to get 2 punt blocks for touchdowns every game. If you do that, it'll be the greatest season in the history of college football special teams. Chris says, I'm not worried. If it was Muschamp, then I would be. See, and I think that's where some caution is advisable, right? Because if you're talking about, okay, maybe you're talking about Will Muschamp, the game management, how it all came together. But I think when I hear that, I hear bad offense, right? And we didn't see much, if any, offensive improvement in game number 1 in 2022 for Carolina football than the 2021 team showed us. So I think that's where some genuine worry and concern is very understandable. Roger says, other than the 2 long runs, the run defense actually pretty good, and the pass D was good. I agree. The offense has to get first downs and field position to help them out some. DC says, I'm sticking with 6 and 6. Anthony, I figured it out. We needed some extra drama for our next welcome home show on ESPN. Remain calm, good people. Yeah. So it's the last one, right? I think this is number 5 coming up on Wednesday. The welcome home series will wrap up. And I'm sure the environment, the Gamecock walk, the LED lights there at Williams-Brice, that'll all be featured and all be a selling point for the program. I'm guessing one of the main reasons that South Carolina agreed to do it. And you get the win, you get the highlights of the punt blocks. So you get to wrap it up. I think how the Gamecocks, from Shane Beamer's perspective, wanted to wrap that thing up. But yeah, you got some things. No, Jason, 0 sacks. But 7 out of 29 passing for 111 yards. The pass defense was really good. The run defense, if I would have seen more push on the defensive line, more consistent push, you saw some. I would say you didn't see enough against Georgia State to be overwhelmingly positive about what is about to happen on Saturday, because Arkansas is a different animal, man. That Gamecock guy podcast weighing in with a good morning, Tim. Bro, what a crazy win. I've been asking everybody who was there to see our offensive line trying to do. What were they trying to do when running? Is it zone blocking, run blocking? I don't know from the X's and O's standpoint. I'm not that offensive line, get on the whiteboard kind of thing. And we came out and looked the same on offense with a better QB. That's crazy. Yep, that's certainly one way to look at it. And Jason points out the Georgia State quarterback didn't look good throwing the football. But the question is, okay, how much credit should South Carolina get? I think there were some open guys that you saw out there that we all are smart enough football fans to know that if you get a better opposing quarterback, things could have looked a lot better for that Georgia State offense on Saturday night. It's going to be much more difficult to slow down Arkansas, much less stop them. So I think plenty of reason for legitimate concern for Carolina football after week number 1. But saying that in a 35-14 win is saying a lot, I think, for the Gamecock program and where it's come under Shane Beamer and company. And so that's really my main takeaway from week 1 Gamecock football. A lot to be concerned about, and yet a comfortable win. That is a good sign overall. I thought one of the funniest, most entertaining post-game comments came from Shane Beamer, talking about DQ Smith specifically, the Spring Valley quarterback, now turned defensive back, and a guy who ended up scoring the touchdown, that first touchdown, I believe, on the punt block. We'll hear Beamer talk about this, wrap this sucker up completely right afterwards.
We talked to our players about it. It's game 1. you can't get caught up in the environment and the new ribbon boards and LED lights and all that stuff and lose focus and not be in the moment. And we talked about, we come out of 2001, it's going to be wild and crazy. Then sandstorm's going to hit. Well, there's going to be 11 of you that got to get in the huddle because we're either going to kick off or it's going to be kickoff return. Don't make us come find you. Well, DQ Smith's over there watching the video board and all that, and he's on the kickoff team. And I'm like, what we just talked about. But then to settle down and then get into the game by making plays like that and playing on defense. I mean, we knew we had a size advantage and a depth advantage, so we wanted to play all of our players tonight as much as we could and roll guys in there. So you saw, critical drive in the second half on defense. Stone Blanton was in there at linebacker. But for DQ, for Rashad, for those guys that have worked really hard on special teams to make a play and contribute is huge. And credit Rashad. I mean, he's a guy that really has matured since last season and didn't really get the carries he wanted tonight from a running back standpoint, but did some really good things on special teams. And we talked about it, we in our, pregame chapel devotional service with Pastor Jackson. I mean, he talked about it today to the guys that were in there, that every player has a role on this team, and those guys played their role well tonight.
Knowing your role. That used to be a thing, right? I think that came from wrestling. Know your role. Monty Lee, the new Gamecock baseball assistant coach coming over from Clemson, introduced us to dominate your role. I think that has to be the difference for this South Carolina football team to be good this year. And it's got to be a huge difference in week one to be competitive in week number 2. You can't just play your role or know your role. You got to dominate your role. I think special teams did that to a large degree in game number 1. You're going to continue to need them to make plays, to be better than the other team's special teams. But that's not going to be good enough to get a win at Arkansas. You're going to need an extreme improvement from the offense in almost all areas. Jalen Brooks, need to give him some credit, right? 88 yards catching. I mean, he looked like the guy that Will Muschamp was hyping up as a guy who can make a difference. Good for that young man. Big time game. Juice Wells, clearly a serviceable wide receiver, going to be more than serviceable, right? Solid. Seems to be solid. But you're going to need more dynamic, explosive plays and consistently to keep up with Arkansas, because everything we saw on Saturday, there's nothing that I saw that makes me think that Arkansas is not going to have their share of explosive plays. Now, South Carolina will need to counter with something other than a punt block for a touchdown. Nick says Arkansas being extremely thin at DB due to injuries might be our saving grace to have a chance Saturday if the line can block. That's a big if, isn't it? That's definitely part of it. Yeah, I saw that Anthony Beamer's kids left him a promise of what they would do to him if we didn't beat Georgia State as well. I guess wrote it up on his window. Pretty hilarious. Tough love, man. Tough crowd. What life is all about. So great to discuss, overanalyze in a lot of ways. Game number 1, 35-14 win for Carolina. Off to a good start, not a great start. Crazy to me. You got the 21-point win for the Gamecocks. You got a 31-point win for Clemson to start the 2022 season. Quarterback drama, I think, is fair to a certain degree at Clemson. Something to keep an eye on for sure, but they're not going to play a legit game for a while, so who knows, right? Because Klubnik's going to get a lot of run, we assume. Is it Furman and La Tech up next for Clemson? So week 4, some of you pointed out, is when moves were made in years past at Clemson. Something to keep an eye on for sure. And game 1 did nothing outside of about a 10-minute span there, mid-third quarter through the mid-fourth quarter, so maybe a 15-minute span there, that DJU, I think, played like Dabo Swinney has advertised for a long, long time, but you got to do it for a lot longer than 15 minutes. And if Klubnik can be the guy, then he's going to be the guy. I think most of us will be surprised. I am more sure that he's going to end up being the guy this year after watching that first game than I was hearing about it going into the first game. LSU, something to keep an eye on. To see the official word, what's coming out of there. You got the new rankings coming up. Florida's certainly going to pop right in there after that good win. Roger says y'all have a good Tuesday. Feels like a Monday. That's always a great sign, right? DC giving us a peace out. Well done, DC, getting in before 5 a.m. this morning on the live chat. Anthony says, see everybody tomorrow, 1-0. Football, all caps from Jason. Chris, good one as always, Tim. Have a good day, my fellow Gamecocks. Go Cox. And he doubled it up on there. Roger wanted us to know you saw an engine blow under caution at Darlington on Sunday night. Good to know. So anything can happen, people. Anything can happen is what we'll leave you with. Thanks for supporting the program. Football season, first show after a college football game here on Unrestricted Free Agent. Feels good. Really appreciate you guys and all your participation. Just listening or watching, very much appreciated as well. Feel free to spread the word. That would be much appreciated on my end too. Comment, like, and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. Got some sponsors for the program, potential sponsors of the program, send them my way. You can always hit me up on social media at Tim Hill UFA is the best place to get me on Twitter, probably. You can go to the website, you can email, you can do whatever you want to, but thanks for doing anything at all and being with this show. We'll do it again tomorrow. Corey Miller and Perry Orth, I think, set to join us tomorrow. Rick Sanford's off in Mexico this week, so that's why you didn't hear from him today. He says, good win, special teams especially, some concerns otherwise, and we'll continue to break it down all week long. We'll have the weekly press conference comments from Shane Beamer to get into tomorrow, and man, before we know it, football season will probably be gone, so let's appreciate it each and every day. Know that you are appreciated, and I'll stop my rambling now. That'll do it. The September 6th edition, Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent.